Okay, so now we get to the very last part of this lecture and the last part of the course. So this is part three, and we're going to be talking about how the city actually is able to deliver the services that we ask for, that we need as a city, that we require as a city, just for it to be a city. So we're going to be talking about the revenue sources. And for the city, it's basically sales tax and property tax. We're going to be talking about somewhat about the state and the different levels of revenue sources that the state has. Also, sales taxes, business taxes, excise taxes. So we'll be talking some of that. I'll be talking to you about that. And then we're going to be talking specifically about expenditures for the city government. So the city gets money in the form of property taxes, in the form of sales taxes, but then what do they use it for? Why do we require these services? And a lot of these services that we have, it's that one, the health department says that we have to have them, such as sanitation, protection, that we want to feel safe. So we have to have the fire department, we have to have the police department. So I mean, so there's many reasons that we need to go ahead and spend money within the city, but the city needs money to operate. So that's what this particular lecture is all about. Okay, now I want to talk about revenues. And the revenues basically say, okay, so where is the money coming from? Where do we get the money for the state? Where do we get the money for the local areas? Where do we get the money for the county? Okay, so let's talk first about the state taxes. A little bit ago, I mentioned that the sales tax in Corpus Christi is 8.25, and it may be different for different cities. But of that 8.25, 6.25 is considered to be general sales tax, and that goes to the state, and that's a big chunk of the revenue source, like about half. It's a little over half. We also have automobile sales tax. Like if you go buy a car, there's sales tax associated with that. But what happens is that we don't really feel it because it's kind of like rolled into the amount of money that you owe, that you're going to be financing. There's also motor fuels tax. And if you when you go get gas, look at the price. I don't know, I think I saw it was at like a 182. And then there's like a little 9. So that little 9 means that's the sales tax that you're paying for it, paying on it for every single gallon that you pump. And so about 11% of our revenue comes from that source. So there's many different sources that are going to the state of Texas. Okay, other sources include they're called selective sales tax, they're called excise taxes, they're called hidden taxes. And so these are basically higher level taxes that are charged to different items that they consider to be sin taxes. All right, so anyway, these include things like liquor. You pay a higher tax on that one. Cigarettes, you pay a higher tax on that one. Gasoline, well, everybody has to drive, so I don't know why they consider that one a sin, but you pay higher taxes on that one. And look at the poll taxes, a POLE, not like poll tax like you go vote. This kind of poll tax means, well, these gentlemen clubs, these strip clubs, well, there's a cover charge. And so what they said is that there's going to be a tax, and I think it used to be $5. I don't even know what it is anymore because, hey, I don't go to those places. But anyway, so part of that cover charge is a hidden tax, one of these hidden taxes that's included in the purchase price. So they're saying, okay, if you're going to partake of any of these, you're going to have to pay for it, and you're going to have to pay at a higher rate. Selective sales taxes. Okay, then we get to businesses. And so in the state of Texas, we have no corporate income tax, and that actually is beneficial to us in many ways because we do have businesses that come to this area and they set up shop here in the state of Texas because they say, well, Texas doesn't have a corporate income tax. But taxes are collected on business. They're collected on the total gross revenue of business. And so, they have to pay, a certain amount of tax, based on what their gross revenues are, although they do get to deduct a lot of things that they might not have to do if it's a corporate income tax. So it works out well for the state of Texas, maybe. Okay, let me show you this chart. Okay, these are actually municipal services. Look at the expenditures first, on the right side. Okay, so we have police and we have firefighters and EMS. That takes up a big chunk. Look at that. And then we have other things like streets and highways, the municipal court. That's the one where I tell you if you get traffic tickets or whatever, you go to that one. Parks and recreations, libraries, and then other expenditures. Okay, then look at the revenue part of it. So we're going to be talking about property tax. We talked about sales tax already. You'll get some, they get some money from the telephone franchise, cable franchise, electric franchise, other franchises, permits and fees, court fines, interest earnings, transfers from other funds and other sources. So as you can see, the biggest chunk of money that we have coming in is coming from the property taxes and from the sales taxes. So we're going to be starting to talk about the property taxes now. Okay, so we're going to be talking about local taxes and specifically property taxes. So let me explain a little bit about this first. If you own a piece of property, say a house or whatever, every year you are going to be your property is going to be appraised, and you get this letter from the appraisal district saying your home has been appraised at such an amount of money. It has been valued at this amount of money. And so the reason that that's important is because then once all of these different bodies, such as the city council, such as the county commissioners, the hospital district, Delmar, there's like so many different entities that say you have to pay a piece, a piece of your millage, for this property. So that particular appraisal, what is the value of your property, that's called an ad valorem tax. And so it's usually assigned to real property, the land and the buildings. But it can also be assigned to personal property, such as automobiles. As I said a minute ago, here in the state of Texas, we pay sales taxes on our automobiles. And so it's kind of rolled into the financing, so you don't really feel it. But before I came here, I'm from Texas, from San Antonio, and but I was in Florida before I came here, and I bought a car in Florida. And so, I went to buy the car, and they say, okay, you need to take this document to the tag agency and pay your property taxes there. And I said, well, I hate to sound stupid, but I don't exactly know what a tag agency is. And so they told me what it was, where I needed to go or whatever. But you had to come up with a couple of $1,000s, right there having bought the car. Nobody told me about that. So anyway, so we just rolled it in. I think we have a better way of doing it, but that's neither here nor there. All right, so most local governments do tax real property, not automobiles, not here in the state of Texas. Okay, so as I said, these tax rates are set by city councils, county commissioners, and school boards. So let me talk a little bit about the school boards, and we're not doing a section on that because that's a whole different animal. But basically, schools are each school district sets its own tax rate. And here in this area, you may or may not be from this area, but we have the Corpus Christi Independent School District, we have the Flower Bluff Independent School District, we have the Tuloso Midway Independent School District, we have the West Oso Independent School District, the Gregory Portland. So many school districts, and they all have like a different tax rate. Okay, so what they're saying is that, all right, people that live in this particular area need to pay taxes in order to finance the schools, to finance the schools. And that's the big deal. That's the big deal, saying, you know what, if you want a good school district, you have to pay more money. And so the amount that's paid depends on the valuation of your house, what your house is valued at. Okay, so then you should be thinking, okay, so if you have property that's worth a lot of money, say for example if you live in King's Crossing, then those houses are valued at a higher rate, so therefore the school district is going to be paying more. And yes, that's a true statement. All right, same thing with Flower Bluff, etc., etc. Okay, but when it comes to, say for example, King's Crossing, well, that's part of a Corpus Christi Independent School District, so it's not like that all of that money is going to go to that new Veterans Memorial High School. It goes to the school district, and the school district is the one that decides how it's going to be divvied up amongst all of the different schools. So far so good? All right, good. Okay, well, they say that the school taxes have increased more rapidly than people's income, than people's personal income. And what it's doing is putting a heavy burden on property owners, because they're saying, the schools keep wanting more money and more money and more money, because they're saying we need more money to run the schools, we need more money to do this, we need more money to do that. So they keep upping the amount that they're requiring, from each of the property owners, and people that own property are saying, but our incomes are not rising at that particular rate, but yet you keep taxing us a lot, and you're taxing us a lot. And that's a true statement. I mean, that is absolutely a true statement. On the one hand, the schools need the money to educate our youth. On the other hand, the property owners are really starting to suffer because of this. And one of the reasons is because we're not getting as much money from the federal government anymore. We're not getting as much money from the state anymore. So the only other thing they can do is go to the property owners at the local level to be able to make up this deficit financing. Okay, so the property owners really complained a lot about paying such high levels of property taxes. And as I said just a minute ago, the state kind of like, it's not funding the school districts at level, federal government not funding them at that level. Property owners are the only ones that can actually, step up to the plate and fill that gap. And so I want to talk a little bit about the Robin Hood plan, and why they had to reform the way the school districts were getting their money. And way back when, and this was back in the 80s, they saw that there was a lawsuit, actually. It was a Edgewood versus Kirby lawsuit out of San Antonio. And so they said, there's some areas that are poor areas, and because they're not being funded by very well by the property taxes, because the state's not giving them very much money, the youth that are being educated in this very poor school district is not getting an equal education as someone who lives in a more affluent type of school district. And so they came up with this thing called the Robin Hood plan, where you take from the more affluent school districts and you give it to the more disadvantaged school districts. And that went on for a while. And so finally it went up to the Texas Supreme Court, that we talked about that in the lecture on the courts. They said it's unconstitutional to do that. You have to find another way. You have to find another way to finance K through 12 public education. So there had to be some reform. Okay, then at the same time they were saying, well, you know what? These homeowners, these property owners need some kind of relief, because this millage rate is just too high. I mean, it's just too high. We can't keep up with it anymore. And so the school said, okay, we will give you a property exemption for your homestead. If you own the property and you're living there, that's your homestead, we'll give you an exemption. And it can be anywhere from about $5,000 to about $25,000. It depends on the county. And this $25,000, that's recent. It used to be $15,000. It's more recent that it was increased to that amount. They lowered that tax cap. Say that they lowered the amount that people had to pay from $1.50 per $100,000 valuation to $1.35 per $100,000 valuation. So they lowered it. And so you should be thinking, well, then does that mean that we're going to get less money, because they're lowering all of these taxes for K through 12 education? And the answer is yes. Less money was going to be going into the school system. But they said, we have a plan. The businesses have agreed to go ahead and close up some of those loopholes on their gross revenue receipts that are taxed on businesses, and they're going to go ahead and start kicking in some of the money. Well, it finally came to when it was going to be implemented, and so the businesses started to complain, and they said, oh, well, we really didn't realize it was going to be so much. We don't want to do that. You'll have to find another way of doing it. And that's where we are right now when it comes to school reform, school financing reform. It's a band-aid approach. It has not been fixed. Everybody is saying something else needs to be done, something else needs to be done. So we'll have to see how that comes out. That's one of the items that's going to have to be taken up by the legislature next go round, or the go round after that, or the go round. It's been going on for a while, so it's going to continue. Okay, so other city taxes that the city needs is that they need to be able to fund operating expenses. So 1% of the city's sales taxes go to fund the operating expenses. You can also collect 1% for economic development. And so this 1% is 1/8 of 1%. And Corpus Christi, for a long time didn't want to do it and didn't want to do it. And it wasn't until 2003 that Corpus Christi actually passed the economic development ordinance, where they're saying, yes, city, it's okay to take out 1/8 of 1%. And we voted that in, and this is how Whataburger Field came about. This is how some of the retail industry has come about, because we were able to approve that 1/8 of 1 cent for economic development for Corpus Christi, Texas. Now, the most recent changes that we have had when it comes to sales taxes is that we, the voters, voted in the ability for the city to borrow money, bond money, to fix all of the streets in the city in Corpus Christi, Texas, because you have to know the streets look pretty bad. So the city has been going through several different iterations, if you want to call it that, of how it's going to be financed. Some is on the utility bills that we pay some fees there. Some of them have been the bonds that the city has been borrowing money for in order to fix the streets. They need to borrow more money because it's going to take like $1 billion to fix all the streets. $1 billion, guys, $1 billion. So they're saying, can we increase your sales tax by increments, certain increments? And the voters voted that in. Now, it has not quite taken effect yet that I know of. I have not noticed it anyway, but that's going to be coming anyway.